sweet spot, baby. You're in the sweet spot, girl. You're in the sweet spot, darling. It's a magical kingdom in a mixed up world. You're in the sweet spot, baby. You're in the sweet spot, girl. You're in the sweet spot, darling. It's a magical kingdom in a mixed up world. You're in the sweet spot, baby. You're in the sweet spot, girl. You're in the sweet spot, darling. It's a magical kingdom in a mixed up world. It's a magical kingdom in a mixed up world. It's a magical kingdom in a mixed up world.
Welcome to the Sweet Spot Podcast. My name is Lynn, and my co-host is Laura. How's it going tonight, Laura?
It's going good, Lynn. I'm excited to talk to Tommy and find out what's been going on this week at Disneyland and also in California Adventure. And I'm super excited to talk to our mystery guest.
Yeah, our special guest tonight. You won't want to miss this.
Yeah.
We're both really excited to share this interview with everyone, and you'll just have to wait, and it'll be coming up soon. This is episode 57, and I really hope you enjoy it. Now we're going to have the Disneyland Resort News with Tommy. How's it going tonight, Tommy?
Oh, it's going great.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm really excited because there's just a lot of things going on at the Disneyland Resort. I'll tell you, this place is hopping
Oh, yeah.
this summer.
Yeah, I've been looking at it all on the internet, and it's just like, oh my gosh.
It's good for my stock.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, the people are coming. People are coming.
great.
Well, guys, on Friday, June 22nd, the last grad night at Disneyland was finally concluded. And grad night at the park has been a Southern California tradition for high school graduates for 50 years now. And the first grad night was held on June 15th, 1961. 8,500 students came from 8 schools, and they only paid, hold on to your horses now, you might fall off your horse now, $3.95 for admission.
Whoa.
That's crazy.
Yes, but if you're worried about grad night, you're missing grad night, all you 10th and 11th graders out there in Southern California schools, grad night is still happening, but a new tradition starts when grad night will be now celebrated and held at DCA for the graduates.
Wonder what
So did you guys go to grad night?
I did. Yeah.
I did not. I went to a private school, and we had a parent-sponsored grad night at, I think we had it at the UCI Bren Center,
Oh, okay.
and it was like a casino night kind of thing. It was crazy. It was on and hopping, but it wasn't at Disneyland.
Yeah, I went. It was fun. But then when I worked there, we didn't in Custodio. We wouldn't work through the whole night. They would have the night crew do it like after midnight, or 1:30 or something. But we would stay up to about 1:30, and then we'd go home. So we'd be there for 2 or 3 hours of it, easily. It was always a mess.
Well, you know that Jack Lindquist was had that original idea for the grad night. He's the former Disneyland president.
Oh yeah.
And he talks about that the first few grad nights at the park, and he says one of the major problems they had was those crafty teenagers trying to bring in and sneak in alcohol.
Oh yeah.
into the park.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the stories he relates in his book, he talks about how he was walking through one of the dance areas, and his eye caught a girl that was dancing with all these guys, all these different guys. They were coming up to her, and they were dancing with her, and they were all sticking their heads into her bosom area for some reason. So he asked a female security person to pull this lady aside and check out what was going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And he relates in the book that this young lady had a in her girdle, she had a water bottle filled with gin connected to a straw that was going up into her bra area.
Oh my god.
Wow.
And she was charging the gentleman 50 cents to dance with him and take a sip from her straw that was in her bra.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
There are also stories about how these teens would go into Disneyland beforehand and before the grad night, maybe a couple hours or a day or two beforehand, and they would take alcohol in, and then they would place it into the toilet bowl tanks,
right,
inside there, and then they would also. One guy was ingenious. He took out a stake, took a stake and tied a string to a bottle and threw it into the rivers of America.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would find. So over the years they would catch on to this and go through the lockers and go through the toilet tanks, and Jack would always tell them, "Hey, switch them out. And take out the liquor bottles and put on Coke bottles.
Wow.
Put in Coke bottles in there and say, you would enjoy this much better."
That's funny.
So Disneyland and grad night definitely had some exciting times. I remember I went to grad night twice, and I went. My girlfriend took me to her grad night, and the next year I took her to my grad night, and we eventually got married. So, so grad night was actually my first date with my wife.
Oh,
so
cool.
That was kind of cool. So, yep. And I even have pictures. So that's really cool. It's really neat. So a 50-year tradition is now over, and it's changed. But what a wonderful tradition, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's neat.
Over in New Orleans Square at the Antoinette's Perfumery in New Orleans, of course, there is they've released a new scent, an official Disneyland and Disney parks actually, exclusive fragrance. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce it because my wife said you'll butcher it. Now, you see in the show notes, I have written it.
Yeah, I took French.
Oh, good. Can you pronounce it for us, Laura?
I will try. Eau de Demoiselle de Givenchy Eau Fraîche.
That means pirate water, right?
Well, actually, fraîche means fresh water. Givenchy, I think that's just a name.
Yeah, that's a name.
Eau de Demoiselle, I think that is lady water.
Yeah, fresh lady water. But it's from the Pirates of the Caribbean, right?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the Givenchy means.
I don't know. I'm just making that Pirates.
Yeah.
But on June 29th through July 1st, they'll be having an event presenting this new fragrance, and so get your Disney fragrance there, everyone.
Wow.
Well, usually when you see a fragrance, it says Eau de Toilette, and this says Eau Fraîche, which means fresh water instead of toilet water. But toilet water just means perfume.
Right, exactly.
Not actually toilet water. So
no.
Don't freak out.
No.
All right.
4th of July is coming, and it's coming up fast, and the parks are decked out in patriotic flair. If you haven't already heard, there will be a special fireworks show on the 4th. Be sure to get into Disneyland early and find your favorite viewing spot. This is the best fireworks show on Earth. And don't forget to visit the Opera House and hear the Voices of Liberty. They're a limited engagement at Disneyland this summer. And this is a really, I haven't heard Voices of Liberty here at Disneyland yet, but I have heard them at Epcot, and they're only here for a little while. So If you're planning to come to Disneyland on the 4th of July, definitely include them in your patriotic events that day.
Yeah, and see Mr. Lincoln.
And see Mr. Lincoln too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they decorated DCA up for the 4th of July. So it looks really, Buena Vista Street looks very beautiful.
Oh,
so
great.
Yeah, you guys.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see that.
We'll have to check out your photos.
Yeah.
Well, I won't be here during the 4th.
Oh, right.
I'll be gone.
Cool. Vacation.
But there are some pictures on Twitter.
Okay.
So I posted when I was there yesterday. So check them out.
Great.
It's also time to brush up on your trivia because Disney legend and chief archivist emeritus Dave Smith will be on hand for a special appearance and signing of his new Disney trivia from the vault, July 14th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the Disneyana shop in Disneyland.
Cool.
Nice.
I'm looking forward to it. I've got to spend a lot of time with Dave Smith last summer, and was privileged to have a wonderful private tour with him.
Oh, really?
And around LA area, and he's a wonderful gentleman. And look forward to seeing him and getting his autograph and have him autograph my book because I'll be there on the 14th.
Yeah, I want to get that book. I won't be able to have him autograph it, but I'm definitely going to get the book.
Yeah.
Cool.
Also coming up for a special event is Ashley Eckstein, the voice of Anakin Skywalker's Padawan learner Ahsoka Tano on the animated TV series Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and she will be making a special appearance and signing her latest fashion releases in the Her Universe collection on July 21st from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the Star Trader in Tomorrowland.
Cool.
Awesome.
And finally, don't let time run out. Check out this month's Artisan Watch releases at the Fortuosity Shop on Main Street. And they include a special piece created in celebration of the 57th anniversary of Disneyland Park, which is July 17th.
Right. Wow.
Awesome.
57 already.
I know.
I don't know if there's any special events happening on that day. I think that's a weekday, I believe. So don't.
They usually don't for the the off years.
Yeah.
I wonder if they will for the 60th. Probably.
I'm expecting something nice for the 60th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, there you go. There's the Disneyland Resort news.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
This episode, I want to welcome a very special guest to our show. This guest was an Imagineer, artist, designer, and has contributed to Disney classic films, was an important part of the development of the attractions at the 1964-65 World's Fair, and also has had a big role in the making of such classic Disneyland attractions as the Tiki Room, the Haunted Mansion, It's a Small World, and others. I'm very happy and honored to welcome Mr. Rolly Crump to our show. Welcome, Rolly.
Hi there. How are you?
Doing good.
You know what? I think you told enough. I don't need to talk anymore.
Oh, I'm sure you have plenty to tell.
Yeah.
Okay.
We mainly wanted to talk about Disneyland because that's what our show focuses on today. And I'm going to have Laura start off with the first question.
Yeah. So, Rolly, you've worked on quite a bit at Disneyland. I was just wondering which Disney project stands out above the rest as your favorite or the one you're most proud of?
Well, the interesting thing about that question, I get it all the time. Everything I've ever worked on has always been my favorite because I was always, every time I was handed an assignment, and it was generally nothing that I'd ever done before, it was very, very exciting to me. So little projects in some cases were just as important as the big projects.
Right.
Definitely.
I mean, I could go on and on about, the big ones like Small World that we did for the World's Fair, because what we did there was we actually designed, built it, and moved it to the World's Fair in 9 months. And nothing's ever been done since then in that time frame.
No.
Or of that scope. And that was because of Walt supporting us all the way.
Wow.
Yeah, and nothing moves that fast in engineering, these days, much less imaginary.
Nothing moves that fast.
No, nothing moves that fast anymore.
No.
I'll tell you, I'll talk about one little area, though, that I'm very proud of. Once Walt passed away, they didn't know what to do with me, which was kind of a cute story. And so Dick Irvine, who was in charge of WED at that time, sent me to Disneyland to be a supervising art director in maintenance, which doesn't sound too exciting, which it really wasn't, but it turned out to be an absolute unbelievable gift, because I went to Disneyland, and what happened was, way back when, WED and Disneyland sort of had an iron curtain between the two of them. Disneyland could not do anything unless WED approved it. And so what they decided to do was send me down there to help resolve some of the problems, which I did. And it was great. I loved it. And it was kind of cute because after a while I realized I felt sorry for Disneyland because they didn't have any control over anything. So I had spent 3 years down there. That included night lighting throughout the park, as well as all the other maintenance projects that I was involved with. So I loved it. And that was probably one of my favorite times because I worked with every one of the divisions at Disneyland. And not only that, I heard stories about Walt from a lot of the people that were there when Disneyland opened. So it was an exciting time frame.
Wow. I wanted to ask you about Haunted Mansion. What role did you have in the development of that attraction?
Well, it was it was the first project I was assigned to. Actually, Walt put Yale Gracie and I. He was a layout designer in animation. So Walt put the two of us together and put us in a great big room and said, okay, you come up with ideas that go into the mansion. So Yale and I worked for a solid year just playing, just trying all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And during that time frame, we developed the head and the ball, which was Yale's idea. I came back from lunch one day, and Yale had gotten a loop projector, and on it was a film of Hans Conrie's Mirror, Mirror, Who's Famous One of All. So he took that particular footage and projected it on a Beethoven bust. And so when I came back, it looked like the bust was talking, and it was absolutely incredible. And we showed it to Walt, and Walt just loved it. So we developed about 25 illusions during that first year, and then we went over to the sound stage and we do full-scale mock-ups of one of the rooms, and in there we used Pepper's Ghost, which is where, if you remember, the ballroom sequence where everyone's dancing. Well, we developed that in another venue. Basically, Pepper's Ghost was invented by a gentleman by the name of Pepper in 1865. And what it is nothing more than a reflection onto a piece of glass. And then it looks like a ghost when you look at it. And so he did it on stage in England and had a sword fight with a ghost, which was kind of interesting. And we learned about that illusion in a series of books called The Boy Mechanic, and Yale had that whole series of books. And so in there, it tells the story of Pepper's Ghost. And those books were published in around 1918, I think, or something like that. So here, this great illusion that everybody loves and thinks are holograms really was developed way, way back. So it was up to us to take that illusion and develop into something that would fit in the mansion.
Those illusions still work today. They're amazing.
Oh, yeah, they're great. They're great illusions.
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
Go ahead, Tommy, did you have a question?
Yes. The Hatbox Ghost is a mysterious and intriguing figure in the Disney fan community. Can you please tell us about the development of his story?
Well, the story changed when Yale and I were working on it. It was a walkthrough, and what happened was and Walt loved the walkthrough idea. And after Walt passed away, operations was scared to death to have anybody on a walkthrough because they thought, the kids would vandalize things, and they didn't want to do that. So they decided to make a boat ride out of it. And not a boat ride. And Yale came up with the idea that it should be a boat ride, and they said, no, we'll have it as an omnimover. So the omnimover then developed that, and then Mark Davis and Clyde Coates were assigned to design the ride. And at that particular point in time, I was doing something else at the time. I was at Disneyland being supervising art director for maintenance.
Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, so so you did mention that since Walt died 3 years before the Haunted Mansion was opened, how hard was it to make his vision a reality?
I really can't answer that. It was probably in the late 60s.
No, probably. How hard was it to make his imagination of what it should be a reality after he died?
Oh, well, it was a nightmare. Because, now that Marie asked me the question, there's kind of a cute story behind all of this. What happened was I always felt from the very beginning that when they start, all the different people, a lot of people worked on the concept of the Haunted Mansion. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was all pretty straight arrow, just the normal. And I felt that it needed some imagination in it. It needed some surrealism in it. So there'd been two films that I had seen. One was Jacques Cousteau's Beauty and the Beast, which was an incredible French film that was actually made in the 40s. And then, of course, Fellini's movies that he did. And there was so much in the way of imagination in both of those films, I felt some of that should be used in the mansion. And so as time went on, I developed all these weird pieces of statuary that actually came to life that were part of the architecture of it and everything. So I did a whole bunch of sketches that everybody thought was a little weird. And we had a presentation to Walt, and Dick Irvine put all my stuff over in a corner behind Walt. And I had a model and sketches of what I was doing. And finally, we had a 3-hour session with Walt. Mark and Claude had given their ideas to Walt and everything. And then finally, Walt said to Dick, he says, is that it? And Dick says, yeah, that's it. And he said, well, what's this stuff over in the corner? And they said, well, that's something Rolly did. And he said, well, what is it that Rolly did? And they said, we don't know. You'll have to ask him. So he and I took our chairs. They were on wheels, and we wheeled over to where my sketches were. And he said, what the hell is all this stuff? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, how are you going to use it? And I said, I really don't know. I told him the same thing, that I felt that it needed more imagination in it than just a bunch of footprints on the ceiling. So we sat there and talked for quite a while about it, and he kept saying, Jesus, I don't know how we're going to use this stuff. And I says, well, neither do I. So he stands up and he said, well, I'm going home. So, and he left and he went out. Well, everybody came over to me afterwards and told me that they knew that Walt wouldn't like it because it was too weird. Well, what happened was the next morning I come to work, and I always got into work about a half hour early anyway, so I got there at 7:30, and Walt's sitting at my desk. And I came in, I thought, oh, my God, what's he doing here? And so he looked at me, and he basically said, you son of a bitch. And I said, what? And he said, I didn't get an ounce of sleep last night because of all that weird stuff you showed me yesterday. And I said, well, God, I don't know what to say. I'm really sorry about that. And he said, don't be sorry. He says, I know how we can use it. And I said, how's that? He says, we'll do a museum of the weird, and then you can develop all this crazy stuff that you want to do, and we'll put it in the museum. And when you get finished going through the mansion, you'll have to exit through the museum. And I said, oh, shit, John. Well, that's a great idea. So he said, So he told Dick Irvine to bring all the other guys out that were there in the meeting the day before. They brought them all out, and Walt took about a half hour and took them through the Museum of the Weird. And he says, now I'm going to go home and go to bed. And so when he left, it was really kind of cute. They all came up to me and said, we really knew you had something there.
That's good.
Yeah. So now I knew who the good guys were and who the bad guys were.
So funny.
I wanted to ask you about the 1967 Tomorrow refurb. Did you have your hand in that also?
Could you repeat that, hon?
A little louder.
Oh, in the 1967 Tomorrowland refurb, were you involved in that?
The refurb was when they refurbished Tomorrowland in 19.
Yes.
Yeah.
The new Tomorrowland, I was heavily involved with that. I did the elevator bandstand that came up out of the ground. I did the temporary bandstand where Space Mountain was going to be. I did a little character shop called the Character Corner, and then I also did the Mad Hatter. So and also did trash cans.
Nice.
So I did a lot of things there back in the 60s.
Wow.
See, what happened was I was working on, they didn't give me an assignment after we finished doing Small World for Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back to working on the Museum of the Weird. And Walt came in my office one day and said, what are you working on? I said, the Museum of the Weird. He says, Rolly, you shouldn't be working on the Museum of the Weird. He said, we're doing a new Tomorrowland. You should be working on that. I said, well, no one said anything to me about it. So he left, and about 5 minutes later, I got a call from Dick Irvine's office and went in there, and then he assigned me to do all those things. So I think he was just leaving. Yeah, Dick and I really didn't get along that well.
Oh, really?
Needless to say.
Yeah.
Can you describe to us what a typical day or week at WDI or WED was at that time?
Yeah, what a difficult week.
Or a typical week.
Well, first of all, I couldn't wait to go to work. And, we were really a family. It was a very small group of us when we were on Sonora. I don't think there was more than a dozen of us in the model shop. And the model shop was where everything was designed. And because Walt had to see anything that we designed for Disneyland or anything, he had to see it in a model. And that was because he grew up with model trains. And he understood scale because of models. And so everything we did in a model. And so that's why everything started in the model shop. We had the sculptor. We only had one sculptor, who was Blaine Gibson, and there was about 3 of us that worked on concepts, which was kind of fun. And then Walt would come in with an idea. And this is what was so beautiful about him. Everything we ever designed or built when Walt was alive was his idea. And a lot of people don't realize they were his ideas. It wasn't our idea to do a Haunted Mansion or do a tiki room or any of that. That was all Walt's ideas. So he would come in and give us kind of a rough feeling of what. I'll give you a good example. There was a little restaurant that I was asked to design for Main Street. It was going to be a tea room because Walt wanted some of the elderly people to come and sit down and have a cup of tea. And so I worked on that for a while, and then they were redoing the Adventureland area, so they decided that they do a little tiki room restaurant. So the tea room from Main Street then became a tiki room restaurant. So we sat and had a meeting with Walt about what this little tiki room restaurant might look like, and John Hench did a beautiful rendering of sort of a Tahitian-looking restaurant. And he had a bunch of birds in cages in there. And Walt took one look at the render, and he says, John, you can't have birds in the cages. And John said, why not? He says, because they'll poop in the food. And John said, no, Walt. He says, no, those are not real birds. Those are stuffed birds. And Walt said, no, Disney doesn't stuff birds. And John says, well, no, not stuffed. He's backpedaling about as fast as you could go. He said, no, they'd be little mechanical birds. And Walt said, oh, little mechanical birds. So by the time we got finished with that meeting, we had gotten a Tahitian restaurant decided that there was going to be some tiki sculptures in there, and also some they were mechanical birds that eventually became animatronic birds. In fact, it was the first animatronic show that was ever designed and built. And then, so we were on our way with that. And then Walt asked me to design the pre-show tikis so that when people were waiting to go to the restaurant, they would have some of a little show out there for them. So I got involved with developing that. And that's where the tiki room came from. It just evolved. And then the funny part about it was we got it finished and designed and everything, and Walt took a look at, and we had it all set up in one of the sound stages. Walt took one look at it, and he said, he said, this is too good. He says, this can't be just a restaurant because nobody will leave. So he says, we'll just make an attraction out of it. Well, we had purchased everything for a restaurant, the chairs, the tables, and everything. And so all of a sudden, all these chairs were left over for the restaurant. And so we used those chairs that were bought for the restaurant to sit in when you watched the show. And it was just a few years ago. I mean, this is like 40 years later. They took the chairs out and put in bench seating because you get a larger capacity with bench seating. And all the tables that we bought went to the Tahitian Terrace for that restaurant. So we call them happy accidents. All these things just kind of happened and took place all by themselves.
That's great. Can you tell us a little more about the animatronics and what it was like to be in the middle of this kind of major advance in technology and amusement park attractions?
Yeah, it was. Well, first of all, Walt had studied. In fact, he did a thing on Buddy Epson and actually built a little character that tap danced. It was a little, just a little figure, and so Walt was starting to figure out about how to bring little things to life. And like I said, it was they took film of Buddy Epson tap dancing, and then he developed that into a little figure, the tap dance, and that was kind of the beginning. And then Walt decided that he wanted a Chinese restaurant, and he wanted a little stage, and on the stage was an old Chinese man sitting there, which was actually the first animatronic figure that was designed. And the people in the audience could ask questions to the old Chinaman sitting up there, and he'd answer their questions. Well, Walt played with that idea a little bit, and they actually started developing an animatronic figure that was a Chinaman. And then Walt thought after a little bit, he said, "Well, that's not very impressive." He said, "They're not famous, those little Chinese guys." So he said, "Let's make it Mr. Lincoln." So the next thing we knew, they were developing Mr. Lincoln. And, of course, Mr. Lincoln was sitting in a chair at that time, and the evolution of the animatronics continued on. And then when Walt saw Mr. Lincoln sitting in the chair, then he said to the Maypole, which was where they built the animatronics, he said, "I want him to stand up." So the engineers over there, Maypole thought, "Oh, God, what's he going to ask us to do next? Ask him to walk? I'm sorry." So that was kind of the evolution, starting with a Chinaman answering questions in a Chinese restaurant that finally became Mr. Lincoln.
Wow. When was the last time you spoke to Walt?
When was the last time you spoke to Walt?
Oh, probably the last time I spoke to him was when he said, "What are you working on?" And I told him I was working on this unit, and that's when he said, "No, you should be working on the new Tomorrowland."
All right.
And then he passed away about 8 months later. And he didn't come up. He wasn't looking good at the time. When he was over, he looked sick, and everybody thought he looked sick, but they didn't know what it was. And he didn't come to. I think he only came to WED once or twice after that meeting I had with him, and that was it.
I had another question about the Haunted Mansion. The stretching room is so unique. How did that idea come about?
The stretching room.
Oh, that was, that's an interesting story. We had in order to get into the Haunted Mansion, it was out of the perimeter of Disneyland. It was a huge sound stage outside the berm. in order to get there, you had to go underneath the railroad tracks. And so the only way you could do that is with an elevator. You get in the mansion. Of course, the mansion's really tiny, and when people come out of the ride, they look back at the mansion and say, "How the hell did we see all of that in that little tiny building?" Well, what is you get in the stretch room, and down you go, and then you come out underneath the railroad tracks and go into the huge facility. That's when you get on the Omnimover. Well, Yale Gracie had designed the elevator, and actually he came up with the idea that there should be stretch paintings, and I actually did the first concept of the stretch paintings, but then Mark Davis was assigned to do the ride, and so he kind of overrode my sketches and did them himself, and he did a much better job than I would have done anyway. So, but it was something that evolved out of the fact that it was an elevator, and Yale Gracie had the idea. So Yale Gracie should be acknowledged for the fact that he came up with the idea of that.
Wow,
interesting.
Go ahead, Laura.
So since you did a lot of work with the Museum of the Weird, what parts ended up in the Haunted Mansion? And then
well, there's only one part that ended up. I did a lot of weird drawings of man-eating plants, and Claude, for some reason, liked my man-eating plants, so he took the sketches that I did and made wallpaper out of them.
Oh, okay.
So that's my that. Oh well, and the chair, but yeah, and the chair that's in there. But none of the other stuff was really taken from my sketches to speak of.
Ah, I see.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
What else would you have liked to see in the Haunted Mansion from your Museum of Weird?
What would you have liked to seen in the Haunted Mansion?
What would I have liked to seen?
Well, weird stuff.
Well, first of all, Yale and I developed when it was a walkthrough. This is something that we developed that would have been far superior to what happened, because in a walkthrough, when we got the idea when we were up in Seattle, there was a pavilion up there that we went up and got into an elevator, took us up into the ceiling, and then you were just turned loose, and you were allowed to wander through that pavilion up there. So we realized that we could move 100 people at a time every 3 minutes up on that second level. And Walt saw it and thought it was a great idea. Well, Yale and I's illusions that we developed were developed as little mini theaters. So you'd be in a little theater for 3 minutes, and then you'd move on, and we had what we call a ghost host that would tell you, okay, here we go, go out the door now, we're going to go to the next area. And in that one room that we had, the story that Yale and I came up with is that the room was where the sea captain had lived aboard in this big old mansion. And the story goes, and the story was told that he killed his wife and bricked her up in the wall. So when you come into the room, you stand there for a while, and then the ghost host tells you that every now and then the ghost of the sea captain, he died at sea, and so his ghost comes back every now and then to his room. So what we did, we developed with Pepper's ghost. All of a sudden, it would light up, and you'd see this guy with seaweed all over him, just dripping wet. You'd see through him and everything, and then all of a sudden, he'd become solid, and the water would be running all over the floor because it was all reflected to an offstage vignette. And he would stand there, and you'd hear weird music, and you'd hear coyotes or wolves howling, and all of a sudden, you'd see this figure of his wife, the ghost of his wife, behind the bricks. And all of a sudden, she'd raise her arms, and she'd come out and attack him. And she'd come out screaming to attack him, and then they both would disappear. Well, you couldn't do that on the ride because you have to be in one position to see all of that. So I think that would have been the best illusion we possibly could have done, because I don't think the public would have ever been able to figure that one out.
Yeah,
Wow.
that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Do you guys understand what I'm talking about?
Yes, we do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm not too sure.
No.
Yeah.
We've done our research.
Yeah.
Do you get to go to Disneyland nowadays?
Well, Marie and I go down periodically. I had a little back operation last year, so I'm not as agile. to go to Disneyland like I was, because we always went once a year, and especially at Christmas time, because I love the way they lit Small World. They did a magnificent job in lighting Small World, so I've always enjoyed that.
What's one of your favorite attractions to go on?
Oh, God. Believe it or not, it's the Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
I've always thought that the Pirates of the Caribbean was the best show that we've ever designed and ever built. And it's kind of sad because Walt did approve the Pirates. He saw all the models on it when it was being built. So with his stamp of approval, and then as the years have gone on, they made it even better. The lighting in the Pirates is far superior to what it was when they first. Now, I'll tell you kind of an interesting story about that. I was on the Mark Twain with Walt one time, and he told me, he says, Rolly, look down there and look at the trees and the buildings. He says, if you kind of shut your eyes a little bit and just kind of think about it, you could be on the Mississippi around the 1600s. And he said, you know what? In order to get people to really enjoy an attraction, you have to absorb them for quite a few minutes. The dark rides used to be 3 minutes long, and that does not, you're not absorbed in a ride like that, like the Peter Pan ride. So we did do it. We did absorb it. The Small World is pretty close to, I think it's about 12 to 15 minutes. But the Pirates, I think, is 18 to 20 minutes, which means you're in there longer, you're absorbed by it, and so therefore I think it's really executing a ride the way Walt would have loved it. He never did see the finished ride, but it shows what his thinkings were behind that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's my favorite also.
Yeah, it's got to be. It's got to be the best.
Yeah.
No, my favorites were always the Haunted Mansion and Pirates of the Caribbean. Those are my two.
Yeah.
I'm the same here with Laura. I had a question about Cars Land. Have you visited Cars Land yet? And seen?
No, not yet.
Okay.
No, that just opened.
Right.
And I'm just starting to walk.
Oh, okay. Okay.
He saw the Mermaid ride. That was the last one he saw.
Well, my son worked on the Little Mermaid.
Oh, right.
He was one of the producers and designers of the Little Mermaid.
Right. Tell us about what your thoughts about that ride.
I thought it was great. I think it was one of the best dark rides that was ever designed. It was done extremely well. Mm-hmm. Extremely well.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to kind of wrap it up right now, but I just wanted to I wanted to tell you that one of my, and this isn't a Disneyland attraction, but it's one of my favorite childhood attractions that you were a part of. It's the Knott's Berry Tales.
Oh, my God. Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, believe it or not, that's the best dark ride that was ever designed out of Disney, but it had an awful lot of Disney people working on it, and that's why.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I did too.
I remember that too.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that was kind of interesting about that is that, I don't know that if I start talking about it, I'll talk too long. So,
that's fine.
I was very fortunate to be asked by Knott's to design a dark ride, and I had a little script to go by. And there was a company called Fantasy Fair that used to do all kinds of, they did walk-around carriages for theme parks, and they did all the winter displays at Disneyland. And Tommy O'Neill, who ran it, was a very good friend of mine, so that when I was asked to design the Berry Tales, I knew that I had to get somebody that would build it of the quality that Disney had. So I got a hold of Tommy. I said, Tommy, you got to work with me and help me design and build this ride. And I had done a few little storyboard sketches of it. And so he says, let me kind of think about it. And he said, I have to figure out about how much it would cost to build the damn thing. And I took him through kind of pretty much the areas that I wanted to take him through, and I told him what the square footage was of the building. And so he says, come back tomorrow. So I went back the next day. And he says, Rolly, after you asked me all that, I went home with a splitting headache and had it all night long. So he says, I think I've come up with a budget for it. And I said, okay, what is it? And he says, $600,000. I said, Tommy, no, And he looked at me like I was going to tell him less, and I said, "No, you're going to ask 900,000." He says, "I am," and I said, "Yes," because I kind of had a feeling of what it was going to cost. Because after working, in the park when I was his supervising art director, I had a pretty strong sense of cost because I knew how much it cost to take care of the park and the money that was spent. So Tommy and I built that damn thing for $600,000, and we built it and installed it in about 6 months.
Wow.
Wow.
So I'm very proud of that ride. Very proud of it.
Great.
You built it for 600 or 900? You built it for 600 or 900?
Well, Marie's trying to tell me something, and I have one hearing aid missing.
That's fine.
You told them it was 900 that you told him to charge.
How
much did it cost to build it?
900,000.
Not 600.
Oh no! That's what Tommy wanted to build it for.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, Tommy was going to build it for 6, and I said, "No, you're going to build it for 9." And the beautiful part about that was he had to buy a building big enough to build the damn thing with some of the money that he made off of doing the ride. And then after a few years later, he came to me and says, "Rolly, I'm going to sell the building for about 3 times of what I bought it for." He says, "You just helped me with my retirement."
Well, I wanted to tell you thank you so much for coming on. I just wanted to also tell you as a Disney fan that I really appreciate everything that you created and that you've done for all of us fans.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And this has been a childhood dream of mine. I had a friend of mine, and when we were kids, we used to, every time around Halloween, we would try to do his garage over like the Haunted Mansion. And we always said we would love to pick that guy's brain who did the Haunted Mansion. So,
oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yes, I did the same thing. I had my own little haunted mansion and little scare room during the Halloween times. So you were inspiration for it.
Oh, thank you.
Now he's giving you ideas to do your own Museum of the Weird.
Yeah. There has been a book produced about Knott's Berry Farm, and in there's quite a large section about the Berry Tales.
Okay.
So if you look that up, you can find out where to buy the book on Knott's Berry Farm, and you'll find a section in there.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah, look that up.
Well, thank you again, Raleigh. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Marie.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, wow, what a show. I'm just so honored and just happy that we were able to have Raleigh Crump on the show tonight.
I know. I mean, God, that's been like a childhood dream of mine to talk to.
Yeah.
One of the brains behind the Haunted Mansion,
Yeah, and he shared some stories that I hadn't heard on any other podcast. He's been on several podcasts that I listened to, and he shared some stories I had never heard before. So
yeah, me too. And I mean, I've done a lot of research on the Haunted Mansion, and he told us some things today that I don't think I've ever read anywhere before.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
So that was one for the history books.
For sure, that was awesome. So spread the word about our podcast. We're gonna have more guests like that in the future, and we're gonna be doing some more attraction history coming up. So we wanted to read a couple reviews that we had just this past week, and I'll read these. The first one, it's from Constance Presley, and it says, "Fun and informative, 5 stars. Just discovered this podcast, a unique viewpoint from 2 former cast members. Really enjoying listening to all the past episodes and looking forward to the new ones." Thank you very much.
Thanks.
This one is from Alicia M. "Quickly becoming a favorite Disneyland podcast, 4 stars. a very good Disneyland podcast with former Disneyland cast members, plus a new podcast member, Tommy, who is providing current happenings at Disneyland. By the way, I really love their theme song. I tell my friend Ray all the time, I say, yeah, we always get compliments on the song you wrote. He's like, oh, that's awesome. And let's see. If another one is by Devin Larson. If you like Disneyland Resort, and it says you. So anyway, 5 stars. I can't believe it has taken me this long to write a review for the Sweep Spot. I can still remember listening to the very first episode, and now they have already compiled 50 plus. Great shows. The hosts each put in diligent research on each topic, but still have unique perspectives all throughout, making listening to the Sweep Spot so much more than simply reading Wikipedia pages on Disneyland Resort attractions. As I would imagine many other young people visiting Disneyland Resort have asked, I wonder what it would be like to work here. This podcast gives the best answers you can find on iTunes. The Sweet Spot also features other former and current cast members, fellow podcasters, and Disney history aficionados. Aficionados, yeah. Sorry. As occasional guests. This podcast was great for me since it is just about exclusively centered on Disneyland Resort and attractions, which is exactly what I was after. High recommendations for the Splash Mountain episode. Very heartwarming guest story that any Disneyland fan should appreciate, and the Monorail episode, which is a personal favorite. I've listened to Lynn and Laura when I was sick, stressed out from finals, and even during work, and every time it put me in a better mood after listening. Thanks for all the hard work putting out episodes every week. I know that it must be tough. Keep up the great work, you guys. Wow, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. That means a lot to us.
Yeah, that's awesome. Keeps us going.
Yeah.
I had a couple other things I wanted to mention. We are going to be at the Disneyana convention, and I know we'd said that in the past, but I didn't really have much information. It's going to be at the Crown Plaza Resort Hotel in Garden Grove, and that's near the intersection of Chapman and Harbor Boulevard. So it's probably, my guess is probably about 2-3 miles from Disneyland up Harbor, heading south. It's open to the public on Sunday, July 22nd, and it starts at 11 a.m. For the public and 10 a.m. for members of Disneyana Club, and it's $6 at the door for public and $5 if you're a member. And I've heard there's going to be some really cool guests there. There'll be lots to buy and some book signings of people. And our friend Dave Smith, who wrote the Hidden Mickey novels, will be there signing his books and selling them. And his latest book, In the Shadow of the Matterhorn, which I wrote the foreword for, he will have that on sale. And we'll be on hand just to help promote our show. We're not really there to... We're not really stars or anything, but we're mainly there just we want to get the word out about the show and just hang out with Dave. It should be a lot of fun. So I hope you guys can come out, and probably mention it again for the next few episodes, but just wanted to get that information out. You can check out our show notes at our website at sweetspot.com. We have our Facebook groups going on and pages and Twitter and iTunes reviews. So if you want to have yours read, you can just go to iTunes and write a review. It helps us out and puts us higher in the ratings as far as when people look for Disneyland podcasts. And if you don't want it read, write a review and then just email me or Laura and just say, I wrote one, but I don't want it read. So that's fine too. I respect that. Oh, one other thing. I think we're gonna try to have a Trader Sam's meetup. It's we're just a bunch of friends. We're gonna hang out, and if you want to come by, we're gonna be there. I think on Saturday, the 21st of July.
Mm-hmm.
And not sure on the time yet. I was thinking probably about 7, but I'm not sure yet. Well, in the next 2 episodes, we'll have a time.
Figure it out.
Yeah. But anyhow, thank you again for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the Raleigh Crump interview. Tell other people about it, because I think it had a lot of information that for Disney fans.
Definitely.
And have a good day.
Yep, and have a magical day.
That one too.